Chapter 2. Howard awoke under circumstances that were novel and inexplicable. Instantly, with great clearness, he remembered all that had occurred prior to his final lapse, but could find no clue to his present situation. He was lying on his back in a green radiance, a soft and soothing light that reminded him of the verdant grass and emerald seawater of the far-off earth. The light was all about him. It seemed to flow beneath and above him, laving his body with cool ripples that left a sense of supreme well-being. He saw that he was quite naked, and he had the feeling of immense buoyancy, as if he had been rendered weightless. Wondering, he saw that his skin was entirely free of burns, and realized that he felt no pain, no ill effects of any kind, such as would have seemed inevitable after his dread ordeal in the Mercutian desert. For a while he did not associate the green luminosity with any idea of spatial limitation, for he seemed to be floating in a vast abyss. Then suddenly he perceived his error. Putting out his hands, he touched on either side the wall of a narrow vault, and saw that its roof was only a few feet above him. The floor lay at an equal distance beneath, and he himself, without visible support, was reclining in mid-air. The green light, streaming mysteriously from all the sides of the vault, had given him the illusion of unbounded space. Abruptly at his feet, the end of the vault seemed to disappear in a white glory like pure sunlight. Long, sinuous, six-fingered hands reached out from the glow, grasped him about the ankles, and drew him gently from the green-lit space in which he floated. Weight seemed to return to him as his limbs and body entered the dazzling whiteness, and a moment later he found himself standing erect in a large chamber lined with some sort of pale, shimmering metal. Beside him, a strange, unearthly being was closing the panel-like door through which he had been drawn from the emerald-litten vault. And beyond this being, there were two others of the same type, one of whom was holding Howard's garments in his arms. In growing astonishment, Howard gazed at these incredible entities. Each of them was about the height of a tall man, and the physical conformation was vaguely similar to that of mankind, but was marked by an almost godlike beauty and grace of contour, such as could hardly have been found in the most perfect of antique marbles. Nostrils, ears, lips, hands, and all other features and members were carven with well-nigh fantastic delicacy, and the skin of these beings, none of whom wore any sort of raiment, was white and translucent, and seemed to shine with an internal radiance. In place of hair, the full intellectual heads were crowned with a mass of heavy flesh-like filaments, hued with changing iridescence, and tossing and curling with the weird, restless life, like the serpent locks of Medusa. The feet were like those of men, except for long, horny spurs that protruded from the heels. The three entities returned the Earthman's gaze with unreadable eyes, brilliant as diamonds and cold as far-off stars. Then, to complete his amazement, the being who had just closed the door of the vault began to address him in high, flute-sweet tones, which baffled his ears at first, but after a little became recognizable as flawless English. "We trust," said the being, "that you have recovered wholly from your late experience. It was fortunate that we were watching you through our televisors when you were seized by the savages and were bound to the back of the Croco, the creature known to you as the heat lizard. These beasts are often tamed by the savages, who, being ignorant of the use of artificial heat, make a strange use of the Croco's proclivities for ranging the terrible sunward deserts. Captives caught from rival tribes, and sometimes even their own kin, are tied to the monsters, who carry them through oven-like temperatures till the victims are thoroughly roasted, or, as you would say, done to a turn. Then the Crocos return to their masters, who proceed to feast on cooked meat." Luckily, we were able to rescue you in time, for the Croco, in its wanderings, approached one of our cavern exits in the great desert. Your body was covered with enormous burns when we found you, and you assuredly would have died from the effects if we had not exposed you to the healing ray in the green vault. This ray, like many others, is unknown to your scientists, and it has, among other things, the peculiar power of nullifying gravity, hence your sensation of weightlessness under its influence.
"Where am I, and who are you?" cried Howard.
"You are in the interior of Mercury," said the being. "I am Agvur, a savant, and a high noble of the ruling race of this world."
He went on in a tone of half-disdainful explanation, as if lecturing to a child.
"We call ourselves the Oumnis, and we are an old people, wise and erudite in all the secrets of nature. To protect ourselves from the intense radiations of the sun, which of course are more powerful on Mercury than on the further planets, we dwell in caverns lined with a metallic substance of our own composition. This substance, even in thin sheets, excludes all the harmful rays, some of which can pierce all other forms of matter to any depth. When we emerge to the outer world, we wear suits of this metal, whose name in our language is mouffa. Being thus insulated at all times, we are practically immortal, as well as exempt from disease, for all death and decay in the course of nature are caused by certain solar rays whose frequency is beyond detection of your instruments. The metal does not exclude the radiations that are beneficial and necessary to life, and by means of an apparatus similar in its principle to radio, our underworld is illumined with transmitted sunlight."
Howard began to express his thanks to Agvur. His brain was giddy with wonder, and his thoughts whirled in a maze of astounding speculations. Agvur, with a swift and graceful gesture, seemed to wave aside his expression of gratitude. The being who bore Howard's garments came forward and helped him in a deft, valet-like fashion to put them on. Howard wanted to ask 100 questions, for the very existence of intelligent, highly evolved beings such as the Oumnis on Mercury had been unsuspected by Earth scientists. Above all, he was curious regarding the mastery of human language displayed by Agvur. His question, as if divined by a sort of telepathy, was forestalled by the Mercutian.
"We are possessed of many delicate instruments," said Agvur, "which enable us to see and hear, and even to pick up other sense impressions at immense distances. We have long studied the nearer planets, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and have often amused ourselves by listening to human conversations. Our brain development, which is vastly superior to yours, has made it a simple matter for us to learn your speech, and of course the science, history, and sociology of your world is an open book to us. We watched the approach of your ether ship from space, and all the movements of your party since landing have been observed by us."
"How far am I from the rocket ship?" asked Howard. "I trust you can help me to get back."
"You are now a full mile beneath the surface of Mercury,"
said Agvur,
"and the part of the twilight zone in which your vessel lies is about 5 miles away, and could readily be reached by an incline leading upward to a small exit in a natural cavern within sight of the ship. Doubtless some of the members of your party have seen the cavern, and have assumed that it was a mere animal den. When your vessel landed, we took care to block the exit with a few loose boulders and fragments of detritus easily removable. As to rejoining your comrades, well, I fear that it will be scarcely practicable. You must be our guest, perhaps indefinitely."
There was a kind of brusqueness in his tone as he concluded. We do not want our existence known to terrestrial explorers. From what we have seen of your world, and your dealings with the people of Mars and Venus, whose territories you have begun to arrogate, we think it would be unwise to expose ourselves to human curiosity and rapacity. We are few in number, and we prefer to remain in peace, undisturbed.
Before Howard could frame any sort of protest, there came a singular interruption. Loud and imperious, with clarion-like notes, a voice rang out in the empty air between Agvur and the Earthman. Howard was ungovernably startled, and the three Mercutians all seemed to stiffen with rapt attention. The voice went on for nearly a minute, speaking rapidly, with accents of arrogant command. Howard could make nothing of the words, whose very phonetic elements were strange and unfamiliar. But a chill ran through him at something which he sensed in the formidable voice, a something that told of relentless, implacable power. The voice ended on a high, harsh note, and the listening Mercutians made a queer gesture with their heads and hands, as if to indicate submission to a superior will.
Our temporal ruler and chief scientist, Oumni, said Agvur, has just spoken from his hall in the lower levels. After hours of deliberation, he has reached a decision regarding your fate. In a sense, I regret the decision, which seems a trifle harsh to me, but the mandates of the shoal, as we call our ancient ruler, are to be obeyed without question. I must ask you to follow me, and I shall explain as we go along. The order must be executed without delay.
In perplexity not unmingled with consternation, Howard was led by Agvur to a sort of inclined hall or tunnel, on which the chamber opened. The tunnel was seemingly interminable, and was lit by brilliant and apparently sourceless light, the transmitted sun rays of which the Mercutian had spoken. Like the chamber, it was lined with a pale metallic substance. An odd machine, shaped like a small open boat and mounted on little wheels or casters, stood before the door on the easy, monotonous grade. Agvur stationed himself in its hollow prow, motioning Howard to follow. When the other Oumnis had placed themselves behind Howard, Agvur pulled a sort of curving lever, and the machine began to glide rapidly, in perfect silence, down the interminable hall.
This tunnel, said Agvur, runs upward to the exit near your vessel, and it leads down to the heart of our underworld realms. If the worst happens, as I fear it may, you will see only the antechambers of our labyrinth of caverns, in which we have dwelt, immune to disease and old age, for so many centuries. I am sorry, for I had hoped to take you to my own laboratories in the nether levels. There you might have served me in certain biological tests.
Oumni, he went on, in calm explanatory tones,
has ordered the fusing and casting of a certain quantity of the mouffa alloy to be used in the making of new garments. This alloy, invented eons ago by our metallurgists, is a compound of no less than 6 elements, and is made in 2 grades, one for the lining of our caverns, and the other exclusively for raiment. Both, for their perfection, require a 7th ingredient, a small admixture of living protoplasmic matter added to the molten metal in the furnace. Only thus, for a reason that is still mysterious to our savants, can the mouffa acquire its full power of insulation against the deadly solar rays. The mouffa, used in comparatively heavy sheets for cavern lining, needs only the substance of inferior life forms, such as the crocos, the half-animal savages of the twilight zone, and various creatures which we catch or breed in our underworld tunnels. But the higher grade of mouffa, employed in light, flexible sheets for suiting, requires the protoplasm of superior life. Regretfully, at long intervals, we have been compelled to sacrifice one of our own scanty number in the making of new metal to replace that which has become outworn. Whenever possible, we select those who in some manner have offended against our laws, but such infringements are rare, and commonly the victim has been chosen by a sort of divination. After studying you closely in his televisic mirror, Unavodo has decided that you are sufficiently high in the evolutionary scale to provide the protoplasmic element in the next lot of mouffa. At least, he thinks that the test is worth trying in the interests of science. However, in order that you should not feel that you are being discriminated against or treated unjustly, you will merely take your chance of being chosen from among many others. The method of selection will be revealed to you in due time.
While Agvur was speaking, the vehicle had sped swiftly down the endless incline, passing several other barge-shaped cars driven by the white, naked Immortals, whose serpentine locks flowed behind them on the air. Occasionally there were openings in the tunnel wall, leading no doubt to side caverns, and after a mile or two they came to a triple branching, where caverns ran upward at reverse angles from the main passage. Horrified and shaken as he was by Agvar's disclosure, Howard took careful note of the route they were following. He made no reply to the Mercutian. He felt his helplessness in the hands of an alien extra-human race, equipped, it would seem, with scientific knowledge and power to which humanity had not yet attained. Thinking with desperate quickness, he decided it would be better to pretend resignation to the will of his captors. His hand stole instinctively to the pocket in which he had carried the little tonanite pistol with its 12 charges of deadly heat-producing explosive, and he was dismayed, though hardly surprised, to find that the weapon was gone. His movement was noted by Agvur, and a strange sardonic smile flickered across the unhumanly intellectual face of the savant. In his desperation, Howard thought of leaping from the car, but to do this would have meant death or serious injury at the high speed of their descent. He became aware that the incline had ended in a large level cavern with numerous side openings where multitudes of Oumnis were passing in and out. Here they left the boat-like vehicle, and Howard was led by Agvur through one of the side exits into another vast chamber, where perhaps 50 of the white people were standing in silent semicircular rows. These beings were all fronting toward the opposite wall, but many of them turned to watch the Earthman with expressions of unreadable curiosity or disdain, as Agvur drew him forward to the first of the waiting ranks and motioned him to take his place at the end. Now, for the first time, Howard saw the singular object which the Oumnis were facing. Apparently, it was some sort of rootless plant growth with a swollen yellowish bowl or body like that of a barrel cactus. From this body, tall as a man, leafless branches of vivid arsenic green, fringed with the white hispidity, trailed in limp sinuous masses on the cavern floor. Agvur spoke in a piercing whisper.
This plant is called the Roccalim, and we employ it to choose from a given quota the person who shall be cast into the furnace of molten mouffa. You will perceive that, including yourself, there are about 50 candidates for this honor, all of whom, for one reason or another, in varying degrees, have incurred the displeasure of Unavodo, or have given rise to doubt regarding their social usefulness. One by one, you are to walk about the Roccalim in a complete circle, approaching well within reach of the sensitive mobile branches, and the plant will indicate the destined victim by touching him with the tips of these branches.
Howard felt, as Agvur spoke, the chill of a sinister menace, but in the weirdness of the ceremony that followed, he almost lost his apprehension of personal peril. One by one, from the further end of the row in which he was standing, the silent Oumnis went forward and circled the strange plant, walking slowly within a few feet of the inert branches of poisonous green that resembled sleepy, half-coiled serpents. The Roccalim preserved a torpid stillness, without the least sign of animation, as Oumni after Oumni finished his perilous circuit
and retired to the further side of the room, there to stand and watch the perambulations of the others. About 20 of the white immortals had undergone this ordeal when Howard's turn came. Resolutely, with a sense of unreality and grotesquerie rather than actual danger, he stepped forward and began his circuit of the living plant. The Oumnis looked on like alabaster statues, and all was utterly still and silent, except for a muffled, mysterious throbbing as of underworld machinery at a distance. Howard moved on in an arc, watching the green branches with a growing tenseness. He had gone half the required distance when he felt, rather than saw, a flash of swift, intense light that appeared to stab downward from the cavern roof and strike the lumpish yellow bowl of the Roccalim. The light faded in the merest fraction of time, leaving Howard in doubt as to whether he had really seen it. Then, as he went on, he perceived with startled horror that the trailing tentacular boughs had begun to twitch and quiver, and were lifting slowly from the floor and waving toward him. On and on they came, rising and straightening like a mass of ropey kelp that flows in an ocean stream. They reached him, they slithered with reptilian ease about his body, and touched his face with their venomous-looking tips, clammy and inquisitive. Howard drew back, wrenching himself away from the waving mass, and found Agvur at his elbow. The face of the Mercutian was touched with an unearthly gloating, and his iridescent locks floated upward, quivering with weird restlessness, like the Roccalim branches. At that moment it came to Howard that his fate had been predetermined from the beginning, that the swift, evanescent flash of light, proceeding from an unknown source, had perhaps served in some manner to irritate the living plant and provoke the action of its tentacular limbs. Swift anger flared in the Earthman, but he repressed it. He must be cautious, must watch for an opportunity, even the slimmest, of escape. By giving the impression that he was resigned, he might throw his captors off their guard. He saw that a number of new Mercutians, equipped with long, glittering tubes like blowpipes, had entered the cavern and were surrounding him. The companions of his late ordeal had begun to disperse in various directions. "I am sorry," said Agvur, "that the choice should have fallen upon you, but your death will be swift, and the time is near at hand. The fusing must be completed, and the metal must be poured off and cast in thin malleable sheets before the next term of darkness and slumber, which will occur in little more than an hour. During this term, 3 hours out of every 36, the transmitted sunlight is excluded from all our chambers and passages, and most of our machinery, which derives its power from light, is rendered inactive.